Hello, everybody. It's good to see you again, or that's disingenuous. I'm really just looking at myself, but it's good to be seen by you once again. Welcome back to the Brian Escow Show. I was in a great mood, and I'm still in a really good mood, but I was just a little bummed out. I just got a text from my mom letting me know that one of her friends, who I knew a little bit from our childhood, I knew the couple well, had just passed away from breast cancer. She was probably in her young 70s, way too young, and I didn't know she was sick. But the thing about this woman who just passed was her late husband. So she remarried, but her husband, Roy and Lynn, they were Roy and Lynn. Were my parents' friends, and I remember in high school my band, and we were pretty bad. Okay. Um, the equipment we had certainly didn't serve us well in this performance I'm thinking of, but we performed at a local talent show, at the town center or something, right? We had done a couple shows in high school at the school. I mean, we weren't a real cool band. I mean, we were like a corny, we'll perform at your talent show high school band. Um, but we played like a couple shows beyond that, and including this one in the center of town, and it was cool. And it was really nice that Roy and Lynn came, and I remember them sitting there in their lawn chairs, and they were so supportive. So they were really sweet. Roy was such a sweet guy. They were a great couple. Lynn, they were both so sweet. And Roy, not too long after that time, got prostate cancer and died pretty quickly. So just terrible. Fuck cancer, man. Mm, we can all agree on that. So on that note, welcome back to the show. Please like and subscribe. No, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. If you feel so compelled, go ahead and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening, and leave a 5-star review if you want to do me a big favor. That goes a long way in supporting my effort. Not that I would stop uh, if you don't, but it's a little way to encourage me. So, yeah, like I said in my latest solo episode, or maybe it was the one prior. Yeah, I think it was the one prior in which I discussed Nick Fuentes. The one after that, I just kind of went on a 12-minute rambling about a phone call I got from my dad. But in the Nick Fuentes one, I said, "Oh, there's always something crazy in the news going on," and man, there is. So here I am, kind of sporadically getting around to doing these when I have time. So apologies for the inconsistency, but we have another eventful week, and so I want to talk about some things that stuck out to me, starting with, of course, the No Kings protest. So cutting right to the chase. First of all, you'll never see me at a protest. I mean, and never say never, but I'm not one of these people. I'm not a protester type of person. But as you know, I'm a Trump supporter now, former Democrat. I try to be reasonable. I like to think I'm reasonable, because I made my transition over time. I confronted the issues one by one and made my decision. So I don't consider myself a cultist, or anything like that, a blind supporter or anything like that. So I want to be fair here and say that, of course, I understand why people on the left who don't like Trump find him controversial. He pushes the limits, he tests the boundaries, and I happen to think that's cool, and I like that. I think he's a vigorous executive, and I don't think he's, ultimately crossed that line. And so I thought to myself, what could drive a person, inspire someone to actually take to the streets and claim to be protesting against Trump the king? And so here's what I'm thinking. Sip of tea. Obviously, the first thing is the attempt to overturn the 2020 election. I wasn't comfortable with it. I thought it was too far, but ultimately he abided by the courts, right? Ultimately, he did cede power. He lost, and maybe he took it too far. The one thing I didn't, the thing I was most comfortable with was his call to, is it Raffensperger or Raffensperger? Raffensperger, right? Not Raffensperger. Brad Raffensperger in Georgia. That call seemed to be highly inappropriate. However, so I think that's where his greatest legal exposure is, and that case is pending, I believe. So it's just so strange. He's president now. But so if it ever gets tried, I actually still think he walks on it because the language he used was vague enough to say, hey, look, I was saying find the votes. I wasn't saying steal. I wasn't saying cheat. I was saying audit, find, review. So I think he walks on that. And when you look at it in totality, so that was the biggest pill for me to swallow, the biggest hurdle for me to climb over before I could come around to being a Trump supporter. And my justification ultimately was, look, COVID was so crazy. I'm just willing to give him a pass. COVID was, I don't say the election was fraudulent or illegal. I say that it was unfair and irregular. And two wrongs don't make a right, but I do give him a pass. And you can judge me for that. But that's just my judgment on the whole political landscape, on everything he's been through. I think he absorbed a lot of bullshit, a lot of bullshit. Come on. The media narratives, Russia hoax, all of it. Give me a break. I was willing to give him a pass. I don't hold him responsible for January 6th, even though that was a crazy day. But I've come around to thinking, no, not blaming him for that. Not to say that he's a Boy Scout, okay? Not to say that he's a Boy Scout, but it's a complex, weird, strange, crazy dynamic we have at play. And I'm not willing to put it all at his feet. The next thing I would say after the election challenge is the cracking down on illegal immigration. Nobody nobody. Some people do, I guess. I certainly don't like to see images of people being taken from their homes or communities or places of work, separated from their families. People just trying to make an honest living. Um, my heart goes out to all of these illegal immigrants, right? In some way, for sure. But also, at the end of the day, he's just enforcing the law, and you may not like it, but I also really can't blame him for that. I can blame him for in the sense that I do look. It's his prerogative. It's his decision. He's the president, and he's in choosing to enforce how he's in choosing to enforce. So, he can accept. He does take responsibility. He is responsible for what's happening, but I'm not going to jump to he's a king. He's violating people's rights. It's ugly, but frankly, I kind of believe him when he says this needs to be done in order to fix American wages, in order to uh, secure our border, bring law and order. I mean, honestly, that actually makes sense to me. So I feel for people who came here illegally, but I'm not going to die on that hill defending them. It's, if I, the whole thing, if I went to your country and did that, would there be a cry fest for me? I don't know. The third thing would be bombing ships in the Caribbean, that are allegedly carrying drugs. That's controversial. That's intense. But I don't want to go right to, but, and here's the justification, but they're not American citizens. They're not protected by the Constitution. He did designate them as narco terrorists, and he's doing what you do to terrorists. And look, part of me wants to say I've lost two really close family members to fentanyl. It's messed up. Fentanyl has impacted the Escow family. It's in tragic ways. So part of me does beat my chest and say, "Go, man! You're looking out for families. You're looking out for people. You care that much." Because I don't think he enjoys killing. I think he's willing to do it, obviously, but I don't think he enjoys it. I don't think he would. I think he would rather not. But so in that sense, I look at him and I say, "You're willing to kill to protect people from suffering the fate that certain people in my family suffered." Wow, that's kind of inspiring. Like, talk about strength and vision. And I certainly hope innocent people are not being killed in these strikes. Um, Obviously, you know. But again, this is a controversial area where he is apparently acting in the best interests of the American people. Fentanyl's a real problem. What is it? 100,000 people a year die. So if you just do a pure utilitarian philosophical calculation, say, well, he's saving lives. That's a net good. Look, I'm not saying that's where I start and end, but generally, this is my impression of the issue. Um, two more things here on this list. Wanting to run for a third term, that sounds kingly, and I get that. And frankly, I do think he wants to serve a third term. And part of me wants him to serve a third term. So that would be cool if he could amend the Constitution or find a viable loophole. I'd rather he not do that. I'd rather he not pursue a loophole if there is one to the 22nd Amendment. I'd rather not be doing that. However, if there is one, okay, let's hear your argument, sure, but um, I don't think he should be doing this. I know Steve Bannon's leading the charge, and he's kind of running cover for Trump and saying it's not covering coming from Trump. Like I said, I think Trump is very interested in the option. Um, but he hasn't done it yet, right? But he hasn't done it. Um, so what else can I say in terms of color on this? Yeah, you take a guy who has such an ego like Trump, so competitive, and was, I'm gonna say, a victim in such a scenario. If controversial maybe to say victim, but I think it's an appropriate term to say he was the incumbent president. COVID is unleashed. The election rules are changed mid-election. It's irregular, and he loses by a lot of votes. Biden, gets all these extra millions of votes that even President Obama didn't get. It's like, wait a minute, what? Again, I don't think the election was fraudulent or illegal, but I do understand why he's like, no, that ain't right. I should never have been kicked out of office, voted out, and damn it, I deserve my third term. So I understand the concern here, but I don't want to be dramatic about it. Let's wait until he declares in order to have our No Kings protest, would be my thing on that. Okay. But I'm trying to throw you a bone here, anti Trumpers, and say, I certainly understand your concern. Lastly, here, this National Guard situation, wanting to deploy the National Guard into American cities and help enforce law and order. It's one of those things that sounds on paper like an immediate no, but you look into it and it's like, okay, well, there is some justification here, and maybe it doesn't hold the water in court, but Trump's going to court, and the bottom line is he's not defying the courts. Sip of tea. He's not defying the courts, guys. That's really the end of it. He's a bold leader, willing to be unconventional and controversial. But what is it for? You know, Look, if it turns out that he really wants to put the National Guard in every city to prevent peaceful protests so that he can, glide into his third term, that's a problem. That's a problem. But I don't think that's what it is. I don't think that's what it is. So throwing a bone to the anti-Trumpers, you could say, look, I could see how that looks bad, but that I think is a narrative cooking up in your minds a little bit too prematurely. Like I said, if it gets to that point, you will have people like me. If Trump tries to run for a third term and it is bullshit, which it pretty much would be without an amendment, you will see people like me say, that's enough. This is where we part ways. It's time to be out in the streets for a No Kings movement. But with all of the unfair criticism heaped on him over the years, I'm willing to just say, hey, he's feeding into the hype a little bit. Trump 2028. It's just too premature, guys, for me to be calling for a No Kings protest. Too many times his opponents have gone over the top. And every time you say, oh, maybe they're right about this one. Maybe Trump, has crossed the line. He pulls it back and he leaves them thinking, Man, those guys look stupid for criticizing him. Obviously, he was just talking, just being human. And he's controversial, but that's Trump. He's a once in a lifetime figure. I'm not going to pretend like I don't get why he's controversial, but as you know, critical race theory was a really important issue to me. Trump addressed that head on. I liked how he addressed it. I met a lot of libertarians and conservatives. I started to think, you know what? These people know what they're talking about with the economy. I think I'm going to trust their word than the Democratic people that I grew up with. Frankly, when I compare the two groups, I go, look, I think the Republicans are more equipped to handle these issues. So um, I had the social side figured out for myself, studying the CRT and having my own thought. You don't need a degree in economics, right, to have an opinion on social issues. So I said, I think I see where MAGA is, and I like it, and I'll get to that more in a second. But on the economic side, that was where I was really weak and am really weak, and that's where I look to others. And at the moment, the others I'm looking to uh, are Republicans. So I just said I figured it out for myself where I stood on the social issues, and I liked where MAGA is. So where is MAGA, and therefore what am I in relation to the social issues? Am I a far right extremist? Is MAGA far right? Well, the question is, what is MAGA? Sip of tea. That's annoying, right? I shouldn't overdo that phrase. Alexa likes when I say it, but the question is, what is MAGA? And yes, there is a fringe racist and anti-Semitic element. Nick Fuentes, um, and so on, who want MAGA to be a white identity politics coalition in response to critical race theory, a mirror image of CRT. Well, this is the ultimate case of two wrongs don't make a right. Whereas CRT calls for getting away from the colorblind neutral system that we have after the since the Civil Rights Act into a let's see race, let's acknowledge black skin, let's put programs and institutions into place that can accommodate the needs of black people better and in ways that this current colorblind system never could. I think that's a really fair and honest way to describe CRT. And in addition to that core thesis is the idea that we're going to matriculate we're going to try to rather than matriculating black culture, so to speak, into all these institutions as well, rather it's really undoing the culture that exists, which claims to be colorblind but is really white in effect. We got to undo that culture. And so you can imagine all the intellectuals and all the entertainers and all the artists in various different ways trying to chip away at traditional American culture, which they view as a white supremacist entity. Um, in response to that, you have the Groypers who want this white identity movement to kick all the non-whites out. America is for whites only. That is a far right extremist. That is not MAGA for me. For me, MAGA is I want neutral constitutional principles with respect to race relations. In other words, take me back to the 80s and 90s when racism felt like it was at a low point. It's I want peace through strength. It's I want intelligent economic policies. And what else is it? I wrote a post a couple hours ago defining what is MAGA, and there was one other thing in there. Oh yeah, generally speaking, putting America's first. I throw generally speaking in there because, like with the Argentina beef thing, look, there's going to be instances where we're going to work with other nations. We're going to trade. We're going to help. We're going to do lots of things. We're going to build. We're going to assist. And I don't know if I was an American farmer, I'd probably be pissed. But I don't jump to Trump took a bribe from Argentina. I jump to Trump is looking around at who his friends are, at what's important, at what people are going through, and he wants to help when he can. And I trust that this is a good bet for the economy. It's an investment, and I hope he's not being foolish. with a guy, just for a guy who is friends with him and aligns with him ideologically. Malay's a very, very interesting figure. I really like Malay. How could you not? I mean, he's a Jew, a libertarian. These are things that I'm attracted. These are ideas that I'm attracted to, and they don't always go hand in hand. Not only being a Jew, but a supporter of Israel, Malay is, and Trump, obviously. So there's a lot that I like about that mix. But yeah, if I was an American farmer, I could see how I'd be pissed. But generally speaking, are you going to deny that Trump is putting America first? The Groypers would. They would. He say it was Israel first. But that's the thing. I think the Groypers, had a misconception of what Trump and MAGA is. It's not pure isolationism. It's not white identity. It's let's get back to the America that we know and love, that we're proud of, the old red, white, and blue. None of this woke bullshit. And where we have friends and deep alliances and genuine partnerships, we're going to be there. But we're going to cut back on the soft power. We're going to cut back on nation building. And we're just going to, generally speaking, focus on, I mean, who would argue that Trump is not focusing his attention inward? I think even his critics would have to, most of his critics. Excuse me. Okay, moving on here. So, one of the big stories, of course, was Harry Sisson got digitally defecated on by a fighter jet. I think it was Trump in an AI video, right? Posted on No King's Day a video of a jet flying around and splattering poop all over Harry and a bunch of other people. And look, it's not the most dignified thing a president has ever done. It's funny. I don't have a problem with it. Uh, I wouldn't have come around to being a Trump supporter if I did, right? I came to accept, hey, I don't need my president to be like a fifth grade teacher, role model type of guy. If he's this effective, this energetic, this disruptive, this relentless, this resilient, I'll take a little crude humor um, when he's being, accusations are being lobbed at him that he's ruling as a monarch. I'm just going to roll with it and say, now I understand not everyone is as mature as me, and some people might go, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that now. See, I wouldn't emulate that behavior. And so I understand, look, it's unfortunate that some people are going to view that and say like that's the best way to be. But I think most people are just saying Trump is Trump, man. He's a unicorn. He's unique, and he can just get away with this stuff. Now, people said, "How could you?" Well, Hunter Biden said in a video, I forget who was interviewing him, but I don't think it was Piers Morgan. But he said, like, not only is that ridiculous and childish, but I think it's really putting a target on people's backs. In other words, saying, he's kind of putting Harry Sisson's life in danger, which is a very serious topic and allegation. Um, and I disagree. I don't think in any way that AI video of poop hitting Harry's face could inspire a nut job to act. There was a guy, a congressman, not Chip Roy, but I don't know. I don't even remember his name. But, and I don't know anything about him. Maybe he's a really good guy and a good congressman, a cool guy, but I doubt it because he retweeted a picture of Hakeem Jeffries yesterday, I think it was, or a day or two. Excuse me. I'm going to pause the video and grab a sip of water. Give me a second. All right. Sorry about that cut. I was dying of thirst. I ran out of tea. So, I was saying about the poop video, I don't think it's that serious. I disagree with Hunter Biden that it could conceivably inspire a nut job to act. Now, contrast that with this congressman who posted a picture of Hakeem Jeffries looking like kind of cold and kind of calculating, kind of like a Vulcan from Star Trek, and he goes reptilian, dot, dot, dot. And I immediately reposted that and I go, this is unbecoming of a congressman. Jeez. I thought that is inappropriate. You know, And I'm a crazy guy who's believing in aliens, and every fifth post is, bookmark this when the aliens are here and say, Brian, you were right. I'm freaking off my rocker, right? I believe that, maybe the reptilians are real. Who the knows? But to call a guy a reptilian, that could conceivably inspire a nut job to act. And I don't know the timeline, but as you may have heard, Hakeem Jeffries have received a credible death threat. And so let's assume that it happened successively. The reptilian comment came first, and then the death threat. Again, I don't know if it did, but let's assume that it did for the moment. Exactly. I mean, you cannot. So I feel like I have my finger on this. Trump is a little childish. He's a little immature. He fights fire with fire, but it's effective, and I really don't mind it. And he doesn't really cross that line for me, where this comment from this Republican congressman did. So I feel like I call it like I see it. I feel like I have a pretty good sense of right and wrong. And Harry Sisson, you are a very active and effective public speaker. You're well-known political commentator. You're in the arena, brother. So, I mean, give me a break. If I was out there protesting and what happened to you happened to me, I would say, this is awesome. The president, I would feel great about myself. Look how important you are. You made it to the video, bro. This is huge. So good for you, Harry. You took that shit like a champ. All right. Um, okay, last thing. Ugh, so little water left. It's scary. I read a very interesting article in the New York Times today about I'm sick today. I took the day off. You might not be able to tell because I'm feeling so good. When I get behind the mic, it's like I have superpowers. I get invigorated, but a little under the weather today. Took the day off and did a little extra reading, which was amazing. And I saw this piece about something about Luigi's missing months. Um, where between I don't know, upon graduating or I don't know, forget what it was. I forget what preceded the missing months, but not too long before he committed his assassination, he was like backpacking through. He was in Japan, Thailand. Um, I think he bounced around. There was an image in the article of a third country as well, but I don't think they mentioned that location in the piece. They just talked about him going to Japan and then Thailand and back to Japan. Um, going back to Japan because it was so peaceful and he was looking for Zen. He was really looking to Zen out. Thailand was a little too hustle bustle for him. So first of all, you read it and you go, "What an interesting guy." It seems like a high achiever. Maybe there was some depression, maybe, or some listlessness or something. There was something kind of underlying him. It seems, a brain fog they called it, that kind of maybe prevented him from being his truly best self, but seems like a relatively high achiever, right? We all know he was a the valedictorian of his high school. What else did it say? He he went to UPenn, studied computer science, and then got a job as an engineer in Hawaii. And so maybe it was between his job in Hawaii and the killings that he went backpacking. And it sounds like he had a really peaceful, amazing time in Japan in this mountain area, these beautiful woods, and he wanted to just write and decompress. And wow, who wouldn't want to do that? It sounds amazing. And the bottom line is, he was really inspired by Ted Kaczynski as well, and really interested in, as many people are, in Kaczynski's critique of society, which was so obscured by his crimes. And Luigi wanted to really, ultimately he got set on this path where he just decided. So it was interesting from that clarity, from that Zen-like clarity in Japan, from the wilderness, the idea comes to him, I'm going to kill someone. And there was this reference to before deciding that he was going to do a healthcare provider. And ultimately the gentleman, the late gentleman, whatever his name, Brian Johnson from United Healthcare. He had written in his journals. And so he never used digital devices, and that's straight from Ted Krasinski's critique, right, about technology. So he was writing journals all the time, and this is where his ramblings, or not ramblings, excuse me, his writings um, started to take shape. And in his journal, he first designed that he would just the letters KMD, and the article was like, "What does KMD stand for?" I'll tell you, Alexa and I started Zodiac, the film from 2007, last night. It was inspired by Matt Walsh's post explaining how such good movies were made back then. I go, I haven't seen a couple of these, so we threw on Zodiac. We're going to finish it tonight. It's really good. So I'm not. I'm like, oh, I'm going to solve the puzzle. KMD. To me, it's simple. Kill medical doctor. Luigi was really interested in healthcare, right? And he wanted to make a point here. Not really sure why, but this is what he honed in on. And um, so I think KMD stood for kill medical doctor, but he observed, according to the article in his writings, that if I do KMD, it'll just be a senseless crime. It won't, the message will be lost. And so he goes, insurance is perfect. It checks all the boxes. So this was so calculated. Um, and it's just so weird where you have a guy who, seems to have a legitimate argument or might have a legitimate argument or could have made a legitimate argument, but he used murder instead. Um, and it's just a shame and it's sad and there's no justification for it and it's wrong. Um, but he decided to do that, it appears, to send a message. And according to his writings, he believed he was in the right. He felt completely comfortable that he was justified in doing it. So maybe I shouldn't say that he knew he was wrong, but he decided to do it anyway. That's where he was a psycho. He thought I'm justified. So no, man, don't kill someone. Okay. Even if their killing might successfully have some sort of message that you want attached to it. Even if you successfully attach your message to the killing, i- i- as he did in this case, you're still going to be looked at as a psychopathic killer, dude. And you're going to lose. Your message is going to lose. It's going to set you back. So I wouldn't do it. Highly recommend that you do not kill anybody. And that is about the message of the day. So thank you so much for watching. And I look forward to the next episode. I have next week. I'm interviewing a guy, a friend from Twitter. Teddy Pierce is his name, and he's got a book called Thrones of Davos. That's what it's called. Yeah. See, that's either the subtitle or the title itself, but that's going to be good. Global elites, money, control, sovereignty. Who's on the team? Who's off the team? What's right? What's wrong? Up and down. Look forward to talking to you, Teddy. All right, guys. Have a good one. See ya.